Our 13th Amendment states, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the parties shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction." The ratification of this amendment was the supposed abolishment of slavery and a new beginning for former slaves. But what if I told you slavery in America is still very much real? Slavery was an economic system in which slave owners would profit off the labor of their slaves. Slaves, black men and women in chains working long hours for little pay while enduring the abuse of white men in power. Do you see where I'm headed with this? What we have done is replace an unjust system with another equally unjust system. The prison system disproportionately targets and exploits young brown and black men via free labor. In any case, this unjust system should not only be reformed, it should be abolished, and American civil rights activist Angela Davis provides the alternative. The Netflix documentary 13th further explains and uncovers the many layers of this modern social issue. As explained in the documentary, the central purpose for free labor in the prison system is solely for monetary gain of the entities that abuse prison facilities. Victoria's Secret and Walmart are only two of the many companies profiting off of prison labor. The number of people in prisons is higher than ever before, while companies have created a billion-dollar industry. This is the prison industrial complex, a term coined by Angela Davis herself. We must acknowledge that black and brown men are already more susceptible to being targets of systematic racism, which leads to higher incarceration rates and longer, stricter sentences. The most vulnerable groups in our society are people of color, especially our brown and black folk, who, from the minute they are born, are already at a disadvantage simply for being of color. These communities live in less than fair circumstances and are the most likely to resort to crime just to be able to survive. There is a clear difference between men of color and white men who are caught committing petty crimes. The treatment and apprehension of white men is not nearly as harsh as that of our men of color, and that is the injustice. Our system is not in favor of our communities of color. In fact, they are against us. They'd rather see young brown and black men filling their facilities, working to death solely to keep people of color in submission and to create economic wealth for those white men in power. Let's be real. If our country really cared about our communities of color, they would be building and filling rehabilitation centers, not cages and prisons. In one of Angela Davis's speeches titled "Slavery in the Prison Industrial Complex," she stresses the parallel between slavery and our current prison system. She says this: "We've come to recognize that the prison is precisely one of those institutions on whose structures racism has learned how to hide. Race matters when it comes to determining who goes to prison and who doesn't. Jails and prisons have also become the dumping ground for people who have severe emotional and mental problems." So, Angela Davis actually rejects the label prison reformer, and instead believes in prison abolition, which even she acknowledges is quite controversial. She goes on to propose a sort of replacement for our current prison system, a system in which punishment is not allowed to become the source of corporate profit, or one in which race and class are not the primary determinants of punishment, or even one in which punishment itself is no longer the central concern in the making of justice. We must consider an array of alternatives, like that of education, which can be seen as the most compelling alternative to imprisonment. The alternative for punishment of crimes should instead focus on rehabilitation and reconciliation. There is always a social issue behind a crime, whether it be drug addiction, mental illness, poverty, or lack of education. In the words of Angela Davis, prisons do not disappear social problems, they disappear human beings. Homelessness, unemployment, drug addiction, mental illness, and illiteracy are only a few of the problems that disappear from public view, when the human beings contending with them are relegated to cages. So you see, the problem is not solved by simply locking people away. In fact, the only thing this accomplishes is hiding the problem from public view while the problem still remains. As college students, we must learn to use our education to fight for those without a voice, because we can't just continue to allow the imprisonment of over 2.3 million people. Justice should not come at the cost of slavery.